My guest today is Marc Barros. He's the co-founder of Moment, the best tool in the world for mobile photographers. Now, prior to Moment, Marc was co-founder of Contour, a hands-free camera company that makes action video easy to capture and share. Now, shortly after graduating from the University of Washington at the ripe age of 22, Marc co-founded Contour in 2004 and led the organization from a garage to a multi-million-dollar company with thousands of customers around the world, and also got fired in the process. So Marc, welcome to the show. Let's get right into it. So you got fired from your first company, but really what I think makes you a great guest for this is because you did get fired and you came back with like the vengeance. You came back with more enthusiasm and obviously much smarter. So tell us, what did you learn by getting fired in your first company?
That sounds really smart or really stupid. But I started the first company when I was 20 years old, right? I think it was like a first relationship. Like who you marry at 20 and who you are is different at 30. And so I spent about 10 years building that first company. I just learned a bunch. I just spent my 20s growing up as a person, as an entrepreneur. Along the way, when you started these little side projects in this little company and you're a founder, and then you take on investors and you become a CEO, those are two very different worlds. And I just didn't understand how to go from a founder to a CEO. At the end of the day, when you raise money and you're a CEO, you have a job to do. At some point, if you're not the best person to lead it, they're going to take you out and find someone else that's going to lead it. Yeah. And so I just learned a lot personally around that whole cycle, from founding all the way through to somebody ending it for you. And companies eventually start and then they end. And for me, it was ended for me, and I got to just reflect on that and learn as a person about what it takes to be a great leader and start companies, and then eventually to be a great CEO.
You know, getting fired is never easy, no matter who you are. It's really tough, obviously, when it's your company. So kind of tell us the part about the relationships you had with the people that you founded the company with. So let me rephrase that question. What did you learn by the relationship that you had with your employees after you got fired?
I mean, firing, it's like, my analogy is like the Seahawks, right? When they lost that Super Bowl, it was over, right? Like they lost on the 1 yard, it was over. And in a startup, when you get fired or you're done at that company, it is over. It's like that. There's like no keeping the relationship, kind of come back to company, like it's done. Like the emails don't come in, people don't call you, like you're sitting at home on a Tuesday at 9 o'clock just hanging out going, okay, what am I gonna do, right? But I think I learned at the end of the day that during that process, I didn't really know, as an entrepreneur, what I was really interested in, right? And I didn't really know which people to relate to, and I was just learning. So if you look at the culture of Contour, it was a mix of all these different demographics and people and interests. And it was just figuring out for myself as an entrepreneur which people I connected with, which I wanted to work with, how to build a team. And so I think out of that, I just realized it was really about the people at the end of the day, right? And the people that you care about and the relationships. And so those that are important to me have gone on and helped, and even started some of the next company with me. And those that were just a learning curve, I haven't talked to anymore. And so I think I realized at the end of the day, it was about the people, and the company is just one aspect of that life together. But taking care of people, treating them right, being honest, even if you get fired, you can do that and be respectful.
So tell us about your new company, Moment. So what is that? Tell us, what is Moment about? Yeah,
Moment's about mobile photography. We just found in the time off between companies, you kind of start with like, what are you passionate about? Yeah. And in that time off for me, it's just traveling. My wife and I wouldn't travel for a few months, and just you start taking notes, like what do you love to do? What do you like? And I just realized one thing I loved was photography. Like, I love taking pictures. I originally had my mom's old camera back in the day. It was just about the essence of time and framing those. And so we just started with a little side project. We started making some products that made our phone a better camera. So what we missed with our phones and taking pictures were elements on our cameras, like lenses and ability to take better pictures. And so we started with a side project, some lenses, put it on your phone, put it on Kickstarter, raised 500 grand, and that went from, okay, it's a little more than a side project to a little company.
Yeah.
And so now we're about 12 people and having a lot of fun.
So give us some little advice. So for a first-time founder, give us some advice of how you take that idea you learned as traveling. How do you take that idea and make it into a real company?
I like starting with lots of projects, like lots of side projects, right? So spending your time on the weekend doing it, right? Spending your off hours doing it, like finding different groups of people that maybe you would want to work with together. It just takes a lot of time of like tinkering with different projects or different ideas or different things you're passionate about. And then people, because the mixture of not just the idea, but who you're going to start it with takes time. Like, you don't just walk up to the bar and date somebody like, hey, let's get married. Like, you get to know each other. And so I love like startup weekends or side projects, or like if people aren't going to spend their nights and weekends on this project with you, then they're just not a good fit. And so early on, you're trying to figure out not just the product and idea, but the people. I think those two elements are really important, and so I love doing lots of side projects. And maybe one of them clicks. It's like, oh my gosh, this really works. Customers love it. We got a product out. There's more than a project. But Moment started as a side project. Like, we all spent a couple days a week on it, and then we got to Kickstarter. It was like, okay, there's interest. We spent more time on it. And so you just kind of naturally let it evolve from just something that's fun to like, okay, there's actually something here.
Yeah. So now, let's give a first-time founder some advice about how they deal with the life-consuming activity of a company. So again, let me rephrase the question, make it really, really precise. You're starting a company. How do you deal with the fact that the company will actually consume your whole life? How do you deal with that, and how do you tell a founder how to deal with that?
It doesn't matter if you're a founder or experienced. I think you can struggle with that. Like, I still struggle with that as far as like working all the time and everything I'm thinking about, and like when I'm not there thinking about making it better. But I think early on is there's the people you're going to found it with, and then the people in your life. And so if you're married, you have a spouse, significant other, I think those people are also founding that company with you. And so my wife and I had a lot of talks about what's this next company we want to start and what's important to us, what's our values. So I think being very honest that even if your significant other isn't in the company with you, they are starting it with you. And if they aren't there to support you, it's going to be a long road. Whether it's significant other or even family members having that talk, like, you're going to start this company and what it means and what the impact is on the relationships in your life. And so I think having those honest conversations up front is really important, because if you can't have those talks, when you get fired or it's not working, those talks, or it's about money, those talks are way harder.
Yeah, you know, I can tell you part of the story when I was a second-time entrepreneur. You know, I chose the wrong partner, right? Sure. And you know, when you choose the wrong partner, it really can mess up the whole process. And you know, choosing your co-founder is very similar to choosing your mate. I mean, it's very similar, because you can't just walk out the door once you've started a company. It's not like, oh, see you later.
Right.
So tell us how important it is to find the right co-founder.
It's critical. Like, if you get that wrong in the beginning, just like if you get the wrong investors, you might as well go home. Because there's like two things you really can't fire or get rid of, right? Like, the people you found it with are there. And I think it's important to find the right person, but I think it's important to set it up the right way from the beginning, right? Everybody should earn their equity as they go. Like, if you take your company and you get 50-50 and then it doesn't work out, all of a sudden 50% of the company walked away, and you actually struggled to raise money, you struggled to build a culture. Like, by you leaving, you actually put everybody else in serious jeopardy, which may not be your intent. And so I think it's not just getting to know people, figure out, do you want to work together on a Sunday or in the evenings? Do you like each other and believe the same thing? But honestly, setting up the structure so that if somebody leaves, it's okay and the business can continue. Because if you set it up wrong and somebody leaves, you're actually done. Because no one will give you money when 50% of the equity just walked out the door. And so I think those are like the really hard, honest conversations you should be having up front. And I think a lot of people miss that. Like, just get into the idea, and a year later you're like, okay, wait a second, this person doesn't work as hard as me, or maybe they aren't quite the right fit, but now you're screwed because of how you set it up.
So tell me, Mark, how do you find those co-founders? How do you find that person?
I love the project. Startup weekends are awesome. If you've ever been to a startup weekend, you go meet other people that are passionate about starting companies. You learn how to pitch an idea. You learn how to meet other people. If you're doing physical products, like maker spaces are great. Like, anything in ideas where you can work on weekends or get to know people is what I'm looking for. And so we had like 2 or 3 project concepts going before Moment. Moment was just the one that took off, where it was like, okay, there's actually something here. We kicked around 2 or 3 different ideas, and Monday night Moment group would get together, and like Tuesday night the other group would get together, and like a little weird, different people joining different groups. But I think that's how you get to know people and work on something with them.
How do you go from leading the team to, you know, you mentioned this in your earlier about the difference between the CEO and the founder, because there is a difference. How do you go about starting the company with me and you? Say you and I start the company. How do you go about from you and I starting the company to you being a CEO?
I think of it as sports, right? And maybe everyone's playing the game in the beginning, but somebody has to be the coach at the end of the day, right? And there's usually one coach. There's not 2 coaches or 3 coaches. And so I think even having that conversation early as a team, like, who is going to lead this, and being very clear who is going to be the leader. You may all start as peers, but being honest about the conversation, all right, who is going to lead it is really, really important, because you can't have a mixture of that. And the people that start it with you have to be like, want you to be successful as a leader, have to help you get better as a leader, and have to push you as a leader to get better and watch you grow. A lot of times, particularly first-time founders, you're both 2 20-year-olds out of college, and the other person didn't know crap that they're doing, and you realize that, and then watch them try to grow is actually really hard for the other people as well, because it's like, hey, wait a second, I knew that person when they knew nothing, and now they're the CEO with a title. And so I think that can be a struggle. But I really like the sports analogy. It's like, at the end of the day, you have transitioned from being a player to a coach. And a coach, you're not concerned about yourself, you're concerned about the others and enabling them to be great, enabling them to play the game, enabling them to get better. And so I think making that transition is really hard because oftentimes the best player is not the best coach. Like Phil Jackson's an amazing coach, but he wasn't Michael Jordan playing basketball, right?
Sure.
If you look at Michael Jordan trying to be a coach, it'd probably be a disaster. And so I think oftentimes the best coaches weren't the best players.
Yeah.
Making that transition is super hard.
Yeah. How do you build culture and how do you kind of, help your employees grow? How do you guys do that at Moment?
The biggest thing we've done with Moment is we take these quarterly offsites, like once a quarter, like every 90 days, we go for 2 or 3 days and go do stuff. Like we'll go to Snoqualmie, right, and get a cabin and like spend 2 or 3 days together. And we basically go out and explore. We run team sessions where we actually talk about hard topics like what's working, what isn't working, what's broken, what should be fixed. Like we've talked about different topics from like what should our salaries be open or closed, or how do we handle sick leave or not? Like what are our values, what do we believe in? And then we also do planning. And so in those 3 days, it really forces you to have conversations you're not going to have at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday because you called a meeting, right? Like you just get to know people, and so that actually has built the trust. And once you build the trust, you can have real conversations like, hey, you could perform much better than you're playing right now, right? Like you have another gear, and have that kind of conversation instead of saying, you're not doing a very good job. Yeah. Because you haven't built any trust, you start to be like, hey, where did that comment come from? And so I think for us, we found is building that trust and getting to know people has been easier to have the conversation if someone is doing well or struggling or not a good fit any longer. And so we kind of set it up knowing that people are going to come and they're going to go. Everyone's going to have a time at Moment. Hopefully when they come and then they leave, they're better off than when they started. And so the biggest thing are those offsites for us, and that's how we get to know each other.
Yeah. And so I think one thing that happened to me when I was younger is I'd started the company. I remember I told you about it. I started a company with the founder and realized it was the wrong match, right? Neither good nor bad. We just weren't the right match. And so what we learned was how to have those difficult conversations. Yeah. So that was one thing, the good thing that happened from that experience for me was I could have that really tough conversation because we were not fit right. We just weren't a good fit. But we were intelligent and mature enough that we could have the hard conversation and make a good break. Yeah. So tell me, how do you do that? I mean, how does Marc Barros have the tough conversation with whether it's co-founder or just employee about upping their game?
A lot of practice. A lot of practice. It's just very awkward. Like in the beginning, in that first company, I wrote this post after first company about, what's the one trait you can tell someone's a great startup leader? I run question, and the questions are like, tell me about the last person you fired. Because if you've had to let somebody go, and they were surprised usually on you as a leader. And so I learned a lot in that first company and just around, I wasn't leading well and enabling them and actually setting them up for success. So when I was like, oh, it's not working out and I fired them, it was actually my fault. And so I think learning that as far as setting people up, setting expectations, enabling them to succeed or fail, I think it takes a lot of practice getting better at. And a lot of those hard conversations, the more you have them, the easier it gets. The first time you have them, you're very nervous and you're very awkward. And I think people can feel that.
Yeah. So let's jump to product development. You've built some really interesting products over the years. So you chose to do a Kickstarter campaign, and tell us why you choose to do crowdfunding, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, whatever. Tell us why you do a crowdfunding campaign for the products that you like to create.
I think one of the biggest important steps when you build a product is customers have to pay you for it. Like until customers pay you for it or they use it incessantly and don't stop using it, you actually don't know if they want to use the product. Yeah. You can ask people, hey, would you pay? When you're like, hey, give me $50, like you don't really know. Even your friends be like, yeah, sure. And so I think crowdfunding, if you have a physical product, enables that, right? Because you can prototype for a couple of months. Like we did our first product in like 3 months. And then we put it up and it's like, all right, here's our work. Even though it's unfinished, it's a little nerve-wracking, but at least it forced people to say, will they spend the money or not? Yeah. And as soon as they're willing to spend the money or not, And if they're not, then you don't have something. And so I think it is a really good forcing function for any team. And so we've actually done crowdfunding on our first 2 products. Even though the first product was successful and there was a company raised a little bit of money, we went back just to prove to ourselves that what we're coming up with product 2 just isn't us thinking it's an amazing product and nobody cares. Yeah. And so we'll probably crowdfund every major product we do just to validate that customers actually care and that this is what they want. And so we're huge believers of it. It's definitely nerve-wracking because like I said, like you're putting your work up when it's like half done. Yeah. Like at a prototype, even though you have a vision of like what it's going to become. And so it's terrifying that people judge a half-done product, but we think it's critical.
So what's your advice to, say, a first-time founder that wants to build, a hard product? Actually, they have to actually manufacture it. What like one piece of advice you could give a first-time founder to create a hard good, a manufactured product?
Wherever you're manufacturing it, go there. I think if you're going to learn how to make something physical, you have to actually learn how to make something physical. You have to learn how it's made. Like, what are the materials? What machines do they use? And so I think there are even some accelerators where they're in Shenzhen. If you're going to build your product, for example, it's electronic product in Shenzhen, you actually go there and you spend 90 days and you go to the trade and you actually see them make the product. I think that's super important. A lot of software engineers get very passionate about the software and the code and how it comes together, and they learn about it. And so I think if you're going to make something physical, whether it's a bag or a shirt or an electronic, you should spend a lot of time around the person making it. And it may not be yourself making it, it may be a third party that you find, but I would spend a lot of time there and I would learn the ins and outs so that you can make a really good product. Doing it from here over a phone call or setting up a third party or getting a consultant, you're just never going to learn it. If you've done that for 10 years, you know how the thing is made, okay, fine.
Sure.
But until you spent years doing it, you just don't know.
Yeah, it's really tough to know, right?
It's very expensive mistakes. That's
it's a very
physical
expensive
product
mistake.
And you make 100 of them and they're wrong, or 1,000 of them, it can bankrupt you.
Very expensive mistake. So let's talk just a bit more about that manufacturing piece. So what do you think, what have you seen as a big mistake that, again, founders make when they're manufacturing their first product? What mistake would you say, hey, this is something you should watch out for?
The quality is what gets you. So they go through these different phases or different gates. So you do a prototype and then they tool this thing up with these massive pieces of steel that they cut, and that's your product. If you get things wrong and don't check all the details and then they make 1,000 of them, you're in a lot of trouble. And so it's the quality is this game of whack-a-mole, right? Where you have to ask a million questions and keep checking, and did you do this, and did you check this? And unless you're asking those questions, the assumption of, hey, I want you to make me a beautiful product doesn't come out that way. It's a whole lot of paying attention to all the smallest details and keep refining it. But if you don't do that and you get bad quality, you're done. What are you gonna do with 1,000 pieces that don't work or are bad quality, or customers say it's a 3-star? It's game over.
Game over, exactly. Yeah. So connecting the product piece, manufacturing a product, with creating a great team, which is harder, creating a great product or creating a great team?
I think it just depends on the person, right? For some people, product is really easy. Maybe they're engineering based or design based, and they can really focus on making something good, and they're great at crafting it. Yeah. But they're terrible extending themselves to other people. And I think the vice versa. Some people are great at leading, but don't know enough of the details to make sure the product is really good. I think both are really hard, and they just take a lot of practice. If you want to be great at product, I've been doing products now for 13 years, right? We're starting to kind of figure out how to do products, and it's taken a while. It's taken us a decade to have a process to understand the customer and what they really need and map their journey and then figure out the feature. But it's taken us a decade to feel like we're pretty good at it. And so I think it just takes a lot of practice and a lot of time. It's why I like the projects, right? If you're into products, doing lots of projects and learning how to make products, and just takes a lot of practice. And then if you have something, you're lucky enough that the product, people actually want to buy it, then you can worry about the team piece, right? Yeah. But if people don't want to buy what you have to start, the team piece is irrelevant. So I think you do end up learning about the product first, at least getting customers, and then the team second. And
so for Marc Barros, is it easier to build a team or build a product?
I think product's always easier. There's less people.
just there's no motion. There's no motion in a product, right? There's no motion.
Yeah, it's more predictable, right? You kind of can design and engineer something that's a little bit more predictable, and you can control which features you go for, and you can control the scale of challenge. People's harder because it's an unknown. Maybe just met the person, and they sound great in an interview or sound great in a process, but then they're not doing the things they said they were going to do, right? Or they're not delivering on those, and then you start having those odd conversations. So I think people is much harder than product.
So when you're building your team, what's the first thing that what's the first thing that Marc focuses on, say for employee number 1, 2, and 3? What's the one thing that you think is just super, super critical?
I find early on it's about doing one thing really well. That's it. And so a lot of startups do lots of things, and they're very function-based, and you have sales and marketing. It's no, stop doing all that. You need to do one thing really, really well. Contour, we did a lot of things kind of good, but not one thing amazing. My joke is always, have you heard of a GoPro? Everybody's like, yeah, great, we were the other guys, right? But GoPro was amazing at one thing. The DNA, the founding of that company was about marketing, and it was about content to selling something. In their case, they sold a camera, right? But they were amazing, one of the best in the world at it. The only person that's done it better is Red Bull. Yeah. Right? And I think we were pretty good at product and we were pretty good distribution, but we weren't amazing at one thing. And so I think that's where you get in a lot of trouble is be amazing at one thing, add the people that can make you great at that, and just focus on that. Yeah. And so for a moment, we started just about product. And we used Kickstarter as our crowdfunding, our website, right? Yeah. We didn't go try to build a bunch of stuff or custom software. We just said, make metal and glass great. That was it. It wasn't a bunch of features. We didn't have software yet. We didn't have all those other things we wanted to do. And then the people we added could do that well. And so I think we've kind of added piece by piece. But early on, when you set people up, it's about do one thing really well, make sure they're focused on that, and then add the next piece, and then the next piece.
When you're creating a product, do you think that more entrepreneurs than not create more features than they need or less features than they need?
It's really hard. Generally with physical products, to raise money or to raise a bunch of money on Kickstarter or crowdfunding, you need an amazing set of features. And so you promise this thing you cannot deliver, which is where they all get into trouble. Because if you promise the simple thing of like it does one feature, you're not going to potentially raise a lot of money. And so I think that's the biggest challenge for people is they want to promise this ultimate thing that they want to make, but they don't realize how many years or versions it takes to get there. Right? Like the iPhone, do you know how many versions of the iPhone they've done?
Yeah.
It's like 48 versions, but it started as an iPod, right? Just music, and then it had selection, and then video, right? And then phone. And so if you think of the phone really starting with the iPod, it's like 48 versions and like 10 years to make. And so I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's great to have a vision of what you want this thing to ultimately be, or your product or your software, and then being very disciplined to start with one thing, selling it, getting customers, doing the next thing, selling, getting customers, doing the next thing. And even your first product, you might sell $10,000 of it. That's okay. That's how we started Contour. We literally took, at the time, there was no camcorder, right? There was no YouTube, there was no none of it. So we took a lens and attached it to your camcorder. And so we bought these parts off the shelf, stuck it in our own box, sold, went to the motorcycle shop on our own and sold it for $400, like by hand. And we did that over and over. In the first year, we did like 400,000 in sales. But just us packaging our own stuff, hitting the street, and then we learned a bunch by doing that. And so I think that's how a lot of simple products will start if you're disciplined about it.
Yeah. So I think, you mentioned one thing there that I think is really super important, discipline. I think it's very tough for early founders, first-time founders, second-time founders to have the discipline to, like you say, focus on one or two things and just nail those one or two things. I think that's the tough thing for many, many entrepreneurs.
I think discipline goes all the way through. Like the best athletes are very disciplined. They practice hard. They practice the way they're going to play when it's professional, right? They consist on it every day, and I think as an entrepreneur, you have to do the same thing. It's like exercising, sleeping, right? Working hard, setting a good foundation. So I think that discipline actually carries all the way through.
So I'll interject some things. I know you were a great soccer player when you were younger.
Oh, that was great, but I played a lot.
Well, you played a lot. You were pretty good. You were pretty good. I was also lucky enough to play college basketball as well. So I have that same analogy where, I worked my butt off to be good because I wasn't gifted as an athlete. But I worked my butt off. You were very similar in your approach, and that's kind of the way you approached your company, which I think is why you've been successful.
I think that's why I'm a workaholic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally.
But I think that discipline helped me, right? I think everyone has whatever their founding is to give them some of that discipline. I think two things stack up to that. One is discipline on just like working hard and not giving up, right? And pushing and trying to get better. It's a constant. I always love the Seahawks analogy. They always try to get better. Even at Moan, we're always talking, how do we get better? How do we get better? Just steps at a time, whether it's us as people or leaders or our product, but always trying to get better, I think, is super important. And the second thing you always rely on is the stuff you went through that was really hard, right? Like my mom passing away, like shaped me as an entrepreneur. It was very difficult for me, and like learning how to go through that and handle that. I think those things allow you not to quit. Because when you see someone that's gone through something worse than just, okay, my financial numbers aren't working out, that's a much simpler problem than somebody passing away, right? So I think those two things I found ground you is the work ethic and when you lose something.
So Mark, one final question. You started two companies now. Good and bad has happened through both, I'm sure. If you could give me one or maybe two things as advice to a first-time entrepreneur, what would you say? Focus on these one or two things, because this is what I've learned over the years.
First one's purpose. Like I started the first company, I was 22. I just kind of jumped into it, right? If somebody said, hey, it's going to be 10 years you're doing this, I would have been like, hold on a second, let me actually think about this one. I think having a very clear purpose, like why you're doing this, and the overall problem you're passionate about, right? It's not about the widget or the thing you make or the piece of software. Like clearly there's a deeper problem or something you're passionate about, and I think deeply understanding that is really, really important. Like for us, we believe that people are happy with amazing photography, and so we're all about that purpose and making people happy. And so I think that's the first foundation of starting.
Yeah, having just a great purpose, and probably being able to communicate that purpose, obviously.
You have to learn how to communicate it and simplify it.
Right.
I think that's the biggest thing. And if you're passionate about that overall, you'll find lots of products to make. Everyone talks about the idea. It's like the idea is irrelevant. It's like, what's the overall problem you're passionate? We love mobile photography, so we spend a lot of time thinking about how people take pictures, how they share pictures, how they edit pictures, so we actually understand the whole problem. And then we pick off products or little solutions we want to deliver. You know, if we were just like, hey, we love attachment lenses, that's eventually your idea is going to run out.
Yeah.
So for us, we're passionate about a bigger thing and a movement. We just happen to make products.
Yeah. Well, Marc, thank you very much for being here. I really quite enjoyed it. I hope you did too.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And I'm sure our audience will enjoy everything you've said. So thanks for being here. Look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.